literally, he's not the first one to make it rain. I could take you to Genesis to prove to you who the first person was that made it rain. But scripture said that manna came from heaven and it was spread to them.
The dollar bill background is also quite something.
We don't make it rain on booty cheeks. We don't make it rain on strippers. We only reverence one stripper.
One stripper.
And that's the one that took off glory to put on humanity and then get butt naked on a cross to die for both you and me. The only stripper I'm in love with is Jesus.
What the hell?
And he's the one that puts that bread in my pocket. That bread in my pocket. I got bread in my pocket.
That's simply too much. This is simply too much.
All right, Maggie. So you and I were sitting in a small group cohort meeting at the church, like a leadership thing for people that are exploring kind of their gifts and maybe a calling, but also just like love the well and want to help it out. And we went around, introduced ourselves, and you said something that I think I already knew, but like just surprised me a little bit, that like you had taken several years. I think you maybe said 6 years off of church. I don't know if that's true, but you took several years off of church, or maybe there's 6 years in there somewhere, but you did something. And then you were like, I'm going to go back to church. But you like weren't like sure what you believed yet. But you're like, I just feel like I want to be back in church. And that is such an interesting story. And I've realized that we're now, I think this is episode 8, and we have not really introduced you, or like, who are you and your story. And so I thought it might be interesting just to know like who you are, but by way of like, what was your religious experience? We've touched on that a little bit, but like, especially this journey of, I'm not interested in church. You talked last episode about like you're sharing meals with people and that felt like heaven. And I love that. And so what the draw was to go back into a place that felt more like hell, maybe, to you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I feel like I've talked about my upbringing a lot and some of the religious and theological stuff I was exposed to and believed. Like, that's the other thing, is that I've talked to some people that have been like, oh, this always kind of seemed a little off to me. Or like, even as a kid, like, not to put him on blast, but my husband is one of these people of like, he'll say like when he was pretty young, he's like, wait, that's a little cognitive dissonance. That doesn't really make sense. Yeah. I was like, literally not like that. Like I was a true believer my whole life until I really kind of got to college and some kind of really hard adult life stuff started happening to me, and my faith was shaken, and that led to deconstruction. But yeah, the kind of current timeline of deconstruction, reconstruction I'm working with was in 2020, the year of the pandemic. I was in an emotionally abusive relationship that I think really kind of kicked things off. And then I had a mental health crisis that really just shoved me full bore into deconstruction time for like the sake of my own mental health. Because I had gotten to the point with, I talked a lot about Calvinism. I had gotten to the point that Calvinism had like rotted my sense of self and self-esteem so thoroughly that like I just like hated myself. I didn't want to, be alive anymore, which is really dark. And if you're someone listening to this that is not in a place to listen to this right now, then don't. It's not going to hurt my feelings, because I've been there too. But yeah, it was really rough. And then I actually continued going to church during that time until about 4 years ago. And that's when me and my husband moved to the St. Louis area.
Okay.
We had been going to an Episcopal church. We got married in the Episcopal church. And when we moved and we're trying to find a new church, we both just kind of were at like the point where we're like, we don't really want to do this. Like, it just felt like we were just going just to go. And neither one of us were excited about it. It wasn't really giving us anything. And so we just stopped going to church. And so for, I guess because I started going to the well maybe like about a year ago. So for 3 years, I didn't go to a church at all.
Okay.
And then slowly over time, just had this like craving to go to church again and set foot in the well. And now here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of the reason, so like you went to the church you went to in St. Louis because the officiant was the pastor, right?
Yes.
I'm making that up.
No, that's, it wasn't the officiant of our wedding, but it was the priest that had been there when we started going to the Episcopal church. And we both just really like her. And so, that was why. And yeah, of course, like she's great. And hearing her preaching was awesome, but we were just kind of like, meh, like, I don't want to go, I don't want to get up early on a Sunday and do this,
So I'd be interested to unpack a few different things.
Sure.
Leading up to your first experience back, like walking through kind of like what you felt when you went into the well and what you felt on the ride home. But tell me your first, if you can recall it. This is a weird thing. Like no one thinks like this. So maybe you don't have it. And we should prep this podcast wise. And I should have said you have a story for this. But do you remember your first feeling of like, okay, I think I'm going to go now? Like before you, whether it was weeks, months, days, and like what the yearning was? Because I mean, it sounds like you were in a dark place around religion and all of that. And so to go from a pretty dark place to intrigue again, like not moving yet, but just intrigue, is an interesting place to be. And I know a lot of our listeners are maybe in that exact place of intrigue before action, and wondering if they would ever move back into a church, but they're just maybe intrigued. Do you remember that feeling and like what some of those feelings, emotions, thoughts were that kind of led you in and through that time?
Yes. So I don't have like one specific story. Like there wasn't a singular moment where I was like, all right, I'm going back. It was a very slow kind of like gradient over time. So, and I will say also that it was like a full 5 years for me to go, for me from like beginning deconstruction to, because that was like a specific moment for me when like, I like the Mormon analogy of like the shelf breaker. Like my shelf had a moment where it broke and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so from that moment to me setting foot in the well was like almost exactly 5 years. And that's a long time. A lot of growth happened. I got married during that time. I started my career. We moved to towns, like lots of changes happened. So deconstruction isn't overnight, just to say that. I changed a lot as a person over those 5 years. I think that and again, I'm not 100% sure what spurred this on. It was this desire to continue learning about Christianity and deconstruction, even though I wasn't attending church or professing any sort of faith at the time. So I started listening to podcasts like The Bible for Normal People, which I've been a longtime listener of. Love them.
Yeah, very good podcast.
Data Over Dogma is another one that I listened to a lot, with Dan McClellan, who I believe is of the like Mormon faith tradition, but he's a Bible scholar. So
yeah, Dan's great.
Which is neat. Yeah. And I'm trying to think if there were any other ones that I really, and then I listened to some books. I'm a big audiobook girl. Some of Beth Allison Barr's writing. I read Jesus and John Wayne. I also listened to, I think it's called Pure White, and it's a mini series on basically white women in the evangelical purity culture movement, which I am one. So that was a really good series too.
That was a book or a podcast?
It was a podcast. It was like
Okay.
8 episodes, I think.
Okay, interesting.
Really, really good. So, and I just like, I went through this time where that was like kind of my hobby. Like, I just like, I was so fascinated by Christianity and by the Bible, even though I wasn't a professing Christian. I just like learned a bunch about it. And it kind of got to the point where I was like, I think I might want to go to church again. And it wasn't, I want to go to a church. I was thinking, I think I want to try going to the Well, because I knew that the Well existed through some people I knew in college.
Okay.
And I knew that the odds of the Well being a theologically safe place for someone like me to be, where I'm not sure what I believe about a lot of things, and I hold some beliefs that many people would call heretical, and I was fairly confident that going to the Well, I would not burst into flame and be chased out with pitchforks and torches. So,
which hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't happened yet. In fact, you guys have just kept inviting me further and further into stuff.
Fair enough.
Which again is on you. So but yeah, and then one day I was literally just like, fuck it, I'm going. I'm a grown up. I'm a big girl. I can go to church by myself. And so I did. And yeah, that was great. So I guess that was kind of like a little rambly, but I didn't have any one particular moment. It was just kind of like there was also a discussion I had with one of my friends where I said to her, and she has deconstructed as well, but never really moved as far away from Christianity as I did. She continued to go to church and was always a professing Christian throughout her deconstruction. And I was telling her, like, I think I kind of want to go back to church, but I don't know if I can go to church if I'm not a Christian. And she was like, Maggie, you can go to church if you're not a Christian. Like, it's literally fine. And I was like, okay. So that was also helpful.
You said this in passing, and maybe you've mentioned this before and I missed it, and maybe you want to share it, maybe you don't. But you talked about, did you say shelf breaking moment?
Yeah.
Would you be willing or interested to share what that was?
Sure.
Because I'd just be interested to hear. And I suspect anyone listening like heard that, and like I would wonder what Maggie's was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I will say, for me, it was a lot of like really dark mental health struggles and like suicidal ideation. So this is like a bit of a content warning of like, this conversation will include that topic. I have heard of this. Another podcast that I really listened to was Girls Camp, which is a Mormon deconstruction podcast. But something that evangelicals don't like to admit is that they hold hands with Mormonism oftentimes, and like they are not as far apart as they think that they are.
Sure, yeah.
But the host on there talks a lot about that analogy of like, in Mormonism, if you have something that you can't quite square, like put it on a shelf. And I guess that's a metaphor that's more common in those circles, but like, yeah, put it on your shelf. And then, so people who have deconstructed from Mormonism will talk about like their shelf breaker. Like, what was the point when the amount of things they had to put up on this mental shelf got so heavy that it broke?
Yeah.
And I think that metaphor works really well for a lot of people who've deconstructed from Christianity as well. But for me, it was, it was this kind of two-pronged problem of, I was going through a clinically really depressive episode. So I was battling genuine mental health issues, which combined with this spiritual aspect of like so my experience with depression has been that it truly is like, yes, hopeless for the future. And there is that like, I don't want to do anything. Nothing feels valuable. Nothing feels worth it. But it's also like, it's a lot of like inward, like, I don't feel worth it.
Mhm.
Like nobody really likes me. Nobody loves me. I don't love me. I can't do any, like, it is this like just absolutely no self-esteem whatsoever. And so I was at a really, really low point of just like, I hated myself. Like I didn't like myself at all. I thought I was terrible at things. I thought, you know, like I just didn't see a world in which like I succeeded. And
Yeah.
And that sucks. It really sucks to feel that way. And so that kind of like chemically happening in my brain combined with, because in those moments, my instinct was to turn to my faith for reassurance. But being in a Calvinist tradition, I would say like, oh, I just feel like I'm disgusting and unworthy and I'm not deserving of love or happiness. And
Yeah.
Calvinism was like, yeah, you're right. And so,
Yeah.
so that kind of drove me to a point where one night I was just like, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to do this. Like, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to like live in a world where this is my reality. And it was like in that night, I was just like, I can't be a Christian anymore. Like, I can't do this, because if this is what it's doing to me, I'm not going to survive. I'm not going to make it. So that was like my shelf breaking moment of like, I cannot continue to believe that I am broken, inherently broken, and that there's nothing I can do this side of heaven to solve that problem. Because there's no hope for growth. There's no hope for like, you know, earthly redemption or anything. It was all just like, well, Jesus will, you know, Jesus pays for your sins until you die and then you'll be made perfect. And I'm like, well, then I guess I should just die. Like that was basically the, you know, really disordered line of thinking. But
you can see easily how, like, you can, obviously, as you went through it, but like I think listeners who are in a similar place, and I really do appreciate you sharing that. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
You can see how the cycle of specifically Calvinism and a kind of depraved view is not it does not do any favors to someone that's struggling with legitimate mental health issues, especially around self-worth, in an ecosystem that tells you that you have none to begin with, and that you're actually like, you're ungodly or unchristlike by even assuming that you would have value, right? And so like to I know people in that, like, maybe you have this experience, like, what's the proverb or the psalm or whatever, it's like, don't trust your emotions, and people use that as like an anti-therapy thing. And so it's like, it pushes this idea that like, well, if you're going to talk about your negative emotions, that's just like letting sin take hold, or it's like, and so it is this really dangerous ecosystem for people that find themselves trying to pull out of it. And why I think I appreciate you sharing that, because I think, talk about the claws being sunk in. It's like, if you're someone that's just trying to leave it and you have no sort of issues with depression or anxiety or anything, like, it's still hard. But then if you add that into it, it's like, it actually becomes, again, self-perpetuating. It makes it even harder because it confirms all the things you think are bad about you, so that trying to leave is just a confirmation of your depravity. It's hard, like, to put it very lightly.
Yeah. And I feel really lucky because I already knew that, like, I have been treated on and off for clinical depression since I was a teenager. Like, I already knew this was something I was like predisposed towards, and already had some familiarity with therapy and medication and treatment options and that kind of thing. So it was kind of like a place I had been before and could recognize. But and I'm fortunate in that way, because I was able to like kind of pull the chute. and I will say, like, being in that depressive episode, it was a two-pronged problem and it required a two-pronged solution. So I did back away. I changed my faith practice And that helped spiritually in a really big way. But I also, the next day, went to the student health center and got a prescription for a medication that saved my life. So if you are listening to this and you are in that same place, deconstruction is not enough. Go talk to a healthcare professional, because it will help to believe that you are worthy of love, and and that God loves you and people love you. But what really, really saved me was and is medication. So
Yeah, I would also add, as a pastor in this situation, that pastors are not mental health professionals. And so it's like, I certainly love and appreciate every opportunity I can to walk with people through really hard and dark times. But one of the things that I make clear when I meet with people is that after, I kind of have like a one meeting rule where it's like, if this is something that has outpaced my expertise, which is anything that starts to bleed into mental health, or especially if there's like a need for medications, or like, any of that kind of stuff. Like, and I've spoke with many people that are in suicidal ideation and people that have had depression, and I'm honored and that I'm invited into that space, and I like to share hope and good news. But I'm pretty quick to remind people that I'm not a mental health professional. And so, but I've said to say, like, not a lot of pastors say that. They would say, well, I am a mental health professional because Jesus ordained me as that. And so if you're someone in that situation, I encourage you, please do talk to your friends and your family and your pastors and all that. But remember that there are other professional people around, as you said, Maggie, that weren't just helpful, like you said, very importantly, like life-saving in that journey, and that play an important role that is certainly not sinful in that process. Like, it's an integral part.
100%.
So again, thank you for sharing that. And I hope for anyone listening, it's like they feel seen and heard and hopefully encouraged by your story, and that to know they're not alone, but also maybe see new mechanisms for how to move forward through it. But now, so we're fast forwarding a little bit. So you've got the shelf breaks, and you're not in that dark time anymore, but you're like, I want to go back to church. And I don't know if you've ever had this, so I'll use this as an example. Like, when I went through my divorce, I thought I was fully over it. And then I drove past this place that I'd never drive past, but holds a significant place in the pain and trauma that my divorce caused. And I turned into a version, and I'm just driving in my car, and I just felt these things, and I turned into a version of myself as I thought I was way past this. And I had this visceral reaction. And I think deconstruction can be like that, right? You sit, I'm through it, but you're really never through it. And you go and you sit in something, you hear something, and it's you get thrust back into this. Or we talked an episode ago about, or a few ago maybe, about hymns and stuff, and those pull you in certain. So what was day one like? And have you had some of those moments, and how have you navigated those, if you've had them, this getting pulled back into an old feeling or an old moment or an old sensation, good, bad, or indifferent? How have you handled those?
Yeah. I think I've absolutely had those moments, and there are still things that I'm really sensitive about and have a very kind of knee-jerk reaction to. I remember probably several years ago now, Matt Chandler preached about deconstruction from the pulpit. And this was a time when a bunch of my friends went to the Village in Texas, which is a mega church in the Dallas area that Matt Chandler is the head pastor of. And he was talking about deconstruction as this trendy, sexy thing. He used those words.
Yeah.
And that, it still pisses me off to think about, because I'm deconstruction saved my life, and you're making me sound like a petulant child. And it made me so mad. And to know that people I knew in real life were hearing those words from their pastor. I just saw a clip of it online. I wasn't actually there.
Yeah.
I was just livid and hurt too. Cause I'm how dare you? I'm not just doing this because I saw a TikTok this. I had to make this choice for my health. And so sometimes I will still hear, that was a couple years ago. I'll still hear things that people will say that are well, that's not what Calvinism actually is. Or well, that's not what kind of like implying that I got it wrong, which is also, and maybe this like plays into my pride a little bit, but I'm like, no, I'm very smart. I'm well educated. And I was a Christian in that way for 24 years before I wasn't. And I was like up to my eyeballs in service, in church. Like I didn't just misunderstand for all those years. Like I was in leadership positions, you know, it wasn't like, oh, you just like misinterpreted this one verse and that's what led your entire life and faith to fall apart. So like that also feels very condescending and is really triggering too. But
I do remember stitching that video of Matt Chandler. I think it was it was a wild take, a terrible take.
Yeah.
And I do get that feeling we share a little bit of 8 Enneagram energy. And one of my biggest insecurities is like being not smart enough. And so I always feel myself pushing back on that when someone's like, well, you just weren't X, Y, or Z. And it's, well, I'm not dumb. I'm not an idiot, right? Like I know what I'm talking about. And sometimes that can be a negative, but here's an interesting question. Because I personally enjoyed this for my own self-edification. Has there been anything I've said, either in passing or on a Sunday, that you've been like, well, no, or some, it could be triggering, or just like you've like vehemently disagreed with, or things that have maybe like unintentionally, certainly on my end, but have still thrust you back into maybe a thought or a feeling or an emotion around deconstruction that you're like, you don't feel good about?
Yes. And I don't remember exactly what it was, because what it taught me was more valuable than whatever it was that you said. So that's probably not super helpful, but it was over the summer. Okay. I had been going to the well for a couple of months, and you said something that it reminded me of, I don't even remember what topic it was on. It just reminded me of an evangelical teaching that I had left behind. Okay. And in the moment, I like felt my face get hot, like felt the like emotional reaction to whatever it was that you said. And I started practicing what I do still a lot, which is just like reframing that. So like whatever you said triggered this old belief. And I also knew enough about you at this point to be like, I don't think that this is even what he means. I think that I'm hearing it and like it's going through my own like traumatized filter. And I left that sermon being like, I don't have to agree with everything that Danny says. Like that was like the lesson I took from it, was like, yeah, you're my pastor and you're my friend. And I find a lot of things, most of what you say at the church, to be like incredibly valuable and very helpful for my own personal faith and that of others. But like, you're not Jesus. You're not in charge of my faith and other people's faiths. So I don't have to agree with everything that you say. And that was really helpful. So it doesn't happen a lot, but if we do have differences of like opinion, or you say something that I'm like, well, I don't really believe that anymore, I can just go, well, that's okay. That's Danny's faith and not mine. Like, I don't have to believe everything that he says or agree with, I suppose. Yeah,
but I think that's a really interesting and good distinction. It's like, because I think many of us are taught that we have to believe what the pastor says. And you kind of said that in passing, right? But it's not even just agree with, like, I have to believe that. Like, I'm co-signing to take on their beliefs. And I think that's right. Like, being able to like own your faith and take it. And I appreciate, it's one of the things I appreciate about you, is I think you are critical in a good way, in terms of like, and not that there's a critical in a bad way, I don't mean it necessarily in that way, but I think you are critically examining, what do I want to keep? What do I want to take? What is good? What is bad? As you were talking, I was going through the sermon archives, our sermon planning doc, to see, and I have where you were around in May of 25, correct?
I was, yeah.
So my guess would be that it was one of the sermons in there that was either, I was not preaching on these, but we were looking at Christian-ish phrases. It was probably during that series.
It was probably during that series. Yeah.
And there were two that, well, there were three that I preached on. One, we looked at the phrase, if you sow it, God will grow it, and how that's not good. Yeah. We looked at letting go and letting God. or it's not a religion, it's a relationship. My guess was it was one of those last two in there
Yeah.
somewhere.
It probably was. It might be it's not a religion, it's a relationship. Because I personally find that phrase to not be very useful, of
Yeah.
just like, yeah, that's great that you have a personal relationship with Jesus that you don't think has anything to do with what's going on around here, but like look around at what the Christian church has done historically and currently. Like, it is a religion and it is also a relationship. So, but I don't
Yeah.
remember. Again, that was like almost a year ago at this point. I don't
Yeah.
really remember exactly what you said, but I was
Yeah.
like, that's okay. I can still keep going to church
Yeah.
and not 100% agree with everything that Danny says.
which I think is like the encouragement to anyone listening, and why I wanted to use your story as a lens, was I think there are helpful tidbits to pick up, and one of them being that, like, what does it look like? And maybe you can unpack this a little bit more. I mean, you did a little bit, but if you have any more to add to it, like, what does a sermon mean to you now and look like for you now? Because I think that is something that we'll use Matt Chandler as an example. Like, people go to listen to Matt, and when he says deconstruction is petulant children, like, they're like, well, he said it, and that's now the truth, right? And so what does engaging in a sermon look like for you now? Is it much more like, is it like sifting through gold mining and you're like trying to get the golden nugget? Is it I mean, certainly not wholesale taking your beliefs, but what is it for you?
Yeah, I definitely interact with worship and sitting through a sermon in a way that is a lot different than I used to. Like, I used to be there with like my little notebook and like taking notes, and like it was like a class in school that like you're kind of getting at, like, oh, this person's teaching me the truth about Christianity. I should write it down so I can remember. Now I go into sermons thinking like, I wonder what this is going to make me think about. I wonder what this is going to bring up. Like, and sometimes it does, something you'll say or something JT says will like activate a thought that I maybe like was dormant, or something I'd never thought about before, or something that I wrestle with that kind of gets me thinking throughout the week. Maybe I'll talk to my friends about it. Maybe I'll talk to my small group about it. So it's not just like me formulating what I think about it, but it's also this kind of like communal aspect of like, oh, like I wonder what my friends at small group think about this. Like, how did they see that? And then I kind of am able to like gather and collect different points of view that turn it into this kind of like, I don't know, like really cool amalgamation of like different ways that people interacted with the message. So yeah. And I also look for like practical application pieces of like, okay, then how do I take this information and use it to be a person who is like Jesus in the real world? How do I use this information to bring heaven here? So that's kind of what I think about.
Yeah, I dig that. Well, so for me, I mean, I have hopes for this podcast. I don't do this as much. I do enjoy talking to you, and part of it is one of my joys is intellectual stimulation. It's like something I miss in my life, is like having theological conversations. And I know that every Monday, which is when we record this, from 9 to 11ish, you and I will have really fun, fruitful, and sometimes feisty conversations. So I enjoy that. But
what hasn't gotten too feisty yet?
Not yet, but it certainly will. I've done this enough before to know that around episodes like 15 on was when there will be more. You'll be like, all right, I can like. I just find people have a hard time disagree. Yeah, I think it takes people a while to like get comfortable disagreeing with each other. Yeah. And I think being a pastor adds a level of nuance to that, where people have been told they can't disagree with me. And all I want is an Enneagram 8 is people to disagree with me. So, though I'd be happy if people agreed with me too, that'd be fine. But I always want like this to add value to the deconstructor's life. Like, that's why I do this. And so what would be like, your story already, I think, has been if I was in someone's shoes, I think would be very helpful. And so I really do appreciate you sharing that, just so people would get a lens into you. And I think you've shared some really helpful nuggets. But what would be your encouragement to someone if they've listened 8 episodes into this kind of chapter of the Deconstruction Zone's journey? What would be your encouragement to them as they're going deeper into the throes of their own deconstruction, and maybe as they continue this journey with us? We're honored they would do that, but what would be your encouragement to them as they're in this journey?
Yeah, so when I had that shelf breaking moment, I didn't think I am now an atheist, I'm walking away from the church. My thought was, I have to find a Christianity that's different than what I have been doing. And I personally don't think there's anything wrong with saying, now I'm an atheist and I can't do this anymore. I especially like the place where I was at. So somebody who's in a similar season of just mental and emotional darkness, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if you want to continue in the Christian faith, there is, especially if you come from like an evangelical background, there is so much more than I even realized is available. If you are a person who wants to worship Jesus and worship the Christian God, there are so many ways to do that. And I think that that's really beautiful, that diversity within Christianity, even of like, you know, God is so big and the history of this church is so long that to think that there's one right way to do it is kind of crazy. So you're limited certainly by region and like where you are. A lot of times, especially in more like maybe rural areas, there's just not going to be as many options for like church services that you can attend that are maybe more progressive or just from a different denominational tradition. But the internet is a really powerful tool. I know a lot of people find the well online before they ever set foot in it. So that can definitely be a way to start exploring. Like if you're like me and you're saying, I want to continue in a relationship with Jesus, but I can't keep doing it like this, go find something else. Like there's lots of other ways to do it.
Yeah, and I would say, like, if anyone listening is like, I'm looking for that, one of the things we have tried to do, we know the well is not for everyone and not around everyone, and we certainly are not trying to become the new galactic empire of progressive churches, but we have collected a database of churches around the country that are affirming and inclusive of the queer community, but also just like safe places for people that are deconstructing. And so if anyone's ever interested in that, like drop that in the comments or shoot us an email, deconstructionzonepod@gmail.com, and happy to connect those dots. Like we would love to really help out in that, because it isn't a one size fits all journey, but there are safe places around the country, rural and urban, in the South and in the Northwest and across and everywhere. And we would love to connect those dots. And maybe there's spaces. This is one of the things that it took me a while to figure this out at the well, especially because I become like attached to people like relationally. But it's just not a season for it's not a space for everyone forever. And so for some people, it's a place to like pause and rest, recharge, and go somewhere else, or to like pull the last pieces away and be like, this is done for me. Like we've had people, not necessarily because of anything we've said, but like their deconstruction just ended and it felt like a safe, clean, enjoyable funeral for the religion they once knew. And then they kind of walked away from there. And some people have reconstructed and whatever. And so know that whatever you find, it doesn't have to be the place you're at forever, but it can be a place of really profound hope and healing, rejuvenation, reconstruction, deconstruction, whatever it is, it can be that for you. But it doesn't have to be forever.
For sure. Yeah, things will, like, part of the deconstruction process is like things will change. Like things are always changing. And that's why I don't feel like I'm in a place where I've like deconstructed past tense. I think I'm over like the really scary, horrible part of it for the most part. Like I've been in the darkest depths that I hope to ever be in. So that part I do believe is behind me. Hopefully, please. But I don't think that I'll ever be like done examining and done analyzing. And yeah, even though I am now kind of in this phase of reconstruction, I'm still like, I'm not just like putting up new blocks of like things I'm certain of. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
what can I explore now? It's sometimes it feels like less of like building, like we use that like deconstruction is taking apart, reconstruction is putting back together. But for me, it's been more of like an exploration. Like I was inside of this little house and then I stepped outside and the woods were really dark and scary for a long time. And now I know how to navigate them a little bit better. But like there's so many more like woods out there. There's woods and there's mountains and there's like an ocean that I haven't gotten to yet. And like all of this stuff that I like keep finding. So it's less like I don't feel like I'm penning myself into something anymore. I feel like I'm free to explore. And that's been really fun and really cool. So yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I had a lot of flat Earth jokes about getting past the ice wall. I'm just gonna let this.
Yeah.
So, I won't make fun of flat earthers. So everyone has a seat at the table. So
yeah.
are you a flat earther? You didn't laugh at that. Okay, you just didn't laugh.
Of course, I'm not a flat earther, Danny.
Our next episode would have been about flat Earth for sure.
Yeah.
We should do an episode on creation. That's like an interesting thing that I think causes a lot of people to either start deconstruction or just walk away. Like the creation myth and the creation story is one that I think is really beautiful, but has become really problematic in the way that we told it and like what the reasons behind it are. And we should talk about that next time we get together.
Do you want to know who has the nerve? Is JT sent me a reel of, and he sent it to me and he said, you and Danny, I'm putting him on blast on this podcast right now, you and Danny. And it was a reel of two women talking about dinosaurs and how dinosaurs aren't mentioned in the Bible, so they mustn't have been real. But then one woman postulated that dinosaur bones were created by God and put here so that we could have oil. And I was like, no, no, that's crazy. Love you. That's insane.
Did he send that to me?
No, he just sent it to me on
Instagram. He knew that. Yeah, he knew that wouldn't go well if he sent it to me. I wouldn't.
I said blocked.
Yeah, right.
Blocked.
When JT sends me things that I just like send unsubscribe in all caps.
Yeah, I said blocked in all caps.
That's very, very funny. Well, for anyone that doesn't know, JT is one of our pastors at the Well, and he's certainly listening. He sent us a screenshot of him listening to today, so we know he will eventually listen to this. And JT,
yeah, sorry for blowing up your spot, but
yeah, maybe just don't send hateful messages to us anymore. Though I did call you a flat earther, so I guess I'm maybe not above board.
I am a woman of science, Daniel. Yeah, how dare you?
Well, before this goes any more off the rails, I will say I appreciate I thought this was going to be a short episode, and we're getting up on our average, and so but I appreciate you really like sharing your story, especially going through some of the harder parts. I know that it is not always easy to unpack those parts of our stories. Maybe for some of us it is, but I know it's not always easy, and so I appreciate you doing that. Because I know there's someone listening that is maybe going to, for the first time, hear some hope and good news and maybe a light that they had not known possible to see. So I really do appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I'm happy to do so. Because I feel like I've had enough time to heal from the kind of like acute moments after that. And yes, because like when I was going through that, if someone had said like, I've been here too, and I know the way out, that would have been so valuable. So absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to share.
Yeah, cool. Well, this was fun. We'll hop back on and do this again another week, maybe.
Sounds good. All right. See ya.